The draft is almost here. Free agency's almost here. Trades are almost here. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Let's talk Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I am James Hammy, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320, the Kings Beat, and host of Locked On Kings. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here. Let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, we've got a busy show. First and foremost, we're going to dive right back into this Domantas Sabonis situation. Is Domantas Sabonis on the move or about to be on the move? We'll talk about that because it just keeps getting crazy. Secondly, the Kings, are they realistically going to call the Nets and the Clippers bluff when it comes to Darius Acuff? And then lastly, there's enough chatter here about Zach LaVine opting into his $49 million deal. We're going to talk about what the options are for the Kings if and when that does happen, and why we've kind of got to this situation. All right, so let's dive right into this. We had smoke a week or two ago about Domantas Sabonis and the Charlotte Hornets. It just kept like smoking and then going out and then billowing and then like going out. Like realistically, it was like we were waiting for a new pope. We're just waiting to see the other smoke come out the chimney. And to be honest, it never has. It seems to have petered out a little bit. When the Kings wanted draft capital and the Hornets wanted the 3-time All-Star for free, or maybe worse than free, which is where I kind of had that deal is worse than free. Then that deal kind of quieted down. I'm not saying it's done. It's very possible that, again, the Charlotte Hornets could come back to the table and say, okay, the 14th pick or the 18th pick are on the table. Can we get Domantas Sabonis from you? But as of right now, it has quieted down. And according to one source, a familiar option has reemerged. So the Kings and Raptors came extremely close to a trade the week before the trade deadline in February. I know that to be 100% true. Absolutely 100% true from a source of mine, and a very good source. On Saturday morning, I got a call from a completely different source. That source has the Kings and Raptors talking again. It has been difficult to get that confirmed, but from what I've heard, the Kings and Raptors have discussed a swap that would sound very similar to the one that almost happened pre-deadline, which that would be Sabonis going to the Raptors in a package that includes RJ Barrett and Grady Dick. It's very similar to what was going on at the deadline. It got extremely complicated at the deadline when Toronto wanted someone to take on Jakob Poeltl's contract, and then all of a sudden didn't want to give the Kings any draft capital because it was going to cost them to move off of their center that they owe way too much money to for a 31-year-old guy with a bad back. So it got a little murky. I do not know what an entire package would look like here between these two teams, just that it's based loosely off of those three players from what I've heard. Now, again, this could just disappear and dissipate into thin air, just like, the Hornets conversation, just like the Raptors at the deadline did. So as of right now, I don't know if there would be additional pieces. I don't know if those would include draft stock, whatever, which the Kings have been asking for. The Kings have been asking teams for to get back into the first round. If you're going to trade the best player in a deal, then you a lot of times are rewarded with draft stock, right? So whether this gets over the finish line or not is still in question. A source within the walls of Golden One Center called the rumors inaccurate, the narrative inaccurate. But that can mean a couple of different things. What we do know is that the Kings are shopping all, or if not most, of their veteran players. Outside of, maybe DeAndre Hunter, just because they acquired him, he hurt his eye and he barely played, and they haven't really got to see him play. But even if the right deal came along, I'm sure the Kings wouldn't balk at a DeAndre Hunter trade, just because, again, he's entering the final year of his deal, 28, 29 years old. But what we do know is that they are having a difficult time with some of their other veterans. There are at least a few teams out there that are interested, specifically in Sabonis. We've heard that, again, Charlotte, the Raptors, but be it Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan or even Malik Monk, it's been very quiet. Some teams have, again, called on certain players, but nothing seems like it's going very anywhere really fast. And look, I think there's a reason why RJ Barrett is continuously attached to the Kings. Number one, Scott Perry drafted him with the 3rd overall pick in 2019 as a 19-year-old, shooting guard or small forward out of Duke. He's now 26 years old. He's entering the final year of his contract that'll pay him $29.6 million this year. And then he's an unrestricted free agent after that. Again, he's barely 26 years old. So the way the Kings are set up right now, if you're going to start building a team around some of your younger guys and, maybe a 19-year-old in the draft, which of course Kings will be drafting because almost everyone that in the top 10 is 19. But then, the Max Reno, Neat Clifford's, Dylan Cardwell's 23, 24, 25-ish, Keegan Murray, 25 going on 26, that kind of group of players, then RJ Barrett actually makes a lot of sense. And then on top of that, I would say the same thing about Grady Dick. He was a 13th pick in the 2023 draft. He had a really solid second season in the league, but then he totally fell out of favor last year and averaged just 6 points a game, over 14 minutes per game for the Raptors. But he is a shooter, and the Kings need shooters. He's also 6'7". He can play both the 2 and the 3. So he's got some versatility. And again, like RJ Barrett, he's entering the final year of his, this is a rookie scale contract, but the final year of his contract where he makes $7.1 million this season. So again, if the Kings can move off of Sabonis, it does a couple of things. First, it opens the door for Max Reno, Dylan Cardwell to play major minutes. The Kings will need to add another depth piece, but it would likely be a budget veteran just to give them support. It also would clear $48.6 million of Sabonis' salary off the books for next year. Not this coming season, but the year after that. So it would speed up the timeline. And that's something that I think is very appealing to Scott Perry and his group. Because again, if you can move off of Sabonis' money for next year, even if you were to hold on to Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, that would be $126 million coming off the books. Add in DeAndre Hunter's $26 million, that would put you even higher. So all of a sudden you're living large. $150+ million coming off the books, giving the Kings unlimited opportunity to go out there and change the direction of their franchise. It also a Sabonis trade at this point, it might land that second first-round pick that the Kings have been dreaming of, right? There's a high likelihood, too, if you've got two teams that are interested in Sabonis, maybe one of them, it will eventually pony up the first-round pick that you're looking for. You'd want it now, though. You'd want it today, tomorrow, again, before the draft starts. So then that way, again, if you're looking at the two teams that we know that have been interested, Charlotte and Toronto, that's the 14th, the 18th, and the 19th pick in this year's draft. That would yield the Kings another player to start building around. So that would make sense. Lastly, I think if a deal like this, if it was just a straight 2-for-1 deal where the Kings were taking back, again, maybe they do get some draft capital. Maybe, the 19th pick is too rich for Toronto's blood. Maybe you give them the 34th pick and take back the 19th pick. Maybe you give them the 45th pick and a future second and take back the 19th pick. Maybe something like that. So I think that there are ways to work around this, but also a 2-for-1, it would save the Kings $8.8 million this season and move them closer to being a non-tax paying team. So again, nothing is 100%, but there are murmurs out there. I think it will definitely be an interesting 48 hours leading up to the draft. It just depends on when you're listening to this podcast. But, Tuesday's draft is just right around the corner. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting because I think the Kings are trying to be active. Whether they're successful in this or not is a whole other question. But at least I have some very strong sources out there that are telling me that they're at least trying. They're trying to make moves. And whether that's going to happen or not is really going to come down to whether they can get someone else to give a big thumbs up and to move on from some of these veterans that, realistically aren't going to be part of what the next version of the Kings looks like, whether it's 2 years from now or a year from now or 3 years from now, whatever it might be. All right, let's step aside. When we come back, the Kings are playing chicken. Will it work out? Let's discuss the curious case of Darius Acuff Jr. The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, and alter the outcome in an instant. That's what makes tournament soccer so exciting, from the opening whistle to the final kick. Now FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked into every match with every goal pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals means more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. We've all seen those matches where it's scoreless for what feels like forever, and then one goal completely flips the game. Suddenly everyone is pressing. The crowd comes alive, and the final 20 minutes become must-watch television. I can't wait for Argentina and Austria on Monday. Can Messi continue his run after a hat trick in the opener? Can Austria pull off an upset after a solid win over Jordan in their first match? It should be a wild game. But again, some of these games you can tell right now, especially in the next couple of days, some of these teams are going to be a little bit checked out. And that's where all the goal scoring could come in, especially a couple of hungry teams that are looking to make up for a bad point differential from the early rounds. So from the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. All right, we have the most incredible NBA draft guide for you, and it's free. It's loaded. Every pick in a mock draft with player comps, one sentence summary, strengths and weaknesses. It has it all. Know everything you need to know about the NBA draft from our experts at No Ceiling. It's the Locked On NBA Draft Guide. Get it free at lockedonpodcast.com/NBA guide. That's lockedonpodcast.com/NBA draft guide. There we go. That's better. NBA draft guide. And look, we had our No Ceilings guys on the last couple of weeks. Absolutely love them. Three different draft analysts from No Ceilings came in. All of them were different. All of them had different ideas. Absolutely love what we're seeing there. And the draft guide is just absolutely gorgeous. All right. The Sacramento Kings have interest in Darius Acuff. It might be the worst kept secret in the NBA. It feels like everyone knows it, including the Los Angeles Clippers and the Brooklyn Nets, who just happen to sit with the 2 picks ahead of the Kings at number 5 and number 6. This, to me, it feels a little bit like the 2022 NBA draft, where the Kings sat at number 4 and the Pistons were slated to select at number 5. Everyone in the league knew that the Pistons wanted Jaden Ivey. He was considered a top 4 pick in a very good draft. If you remember back to that night after the draft, Keegan Murray had left a little early, I guess, and they actually took a picture with Jaden Ivey with the other 3 guys in the top 4 outside of Keegan Murray. Very awkward moment for the league, but this kind of feels like the same exact situation. The Kings tried to extract something out of Detroit to swap 4 and 5, but ended up just drafting Keegan Murray and going on about their day. For whatever reason, the Pistons were not interested. They knew that the Kings weren't going to draft Jaden Ivey, they had too many guards already. They weren't going to do it. And so they bet and they won that the Kings would just let Jaden Ivey fall past him. And now it appears that the Kings made the right call there. But let's get back to this season's draft, right? The Clippers have a tough time selecting Acuff at number 5 because they just traded for a similar guard in Darius Garland. The Nets could select Acuff. He's worked out for them. He's had multiple conversations with their groups, but we're just hours before the draft, and everyone knows that not only do the Kings want Acuff, but Acuff actually wants the Kings. Like, it's a pretty strong vibe that his group has been putting out to multiple people. You heard it coming out of the combine that they were very open, that the Kings are where they want him to land. And I do think it's very interesting. Again, the Kings could trade up, but they don't really have a war chest to work with. And they're a team at the bottom. I mean, they're 22-60. The picks might be the only way out of this mess. And that's where we start to get to like this game of chicken. Like, realistically, this is a couple of teams, not just one team, like it was with Detroit and the Kings a couple of years ago. This is 2 teams that would have to pass on Acuff. And I think like the best case scenario for the Kings is that they just sit at 7 and Acuff lands in their lap. And I think that it's actually a pretty decent likelihood that that happens, especially if you look at the fact that it's very possible that the Clippers, who that number 5 pick was, the odds-on favorite, if any pick was going to get traded in like the top 10, it was going to be that number 5 pick. That just seems like it's fizzled. Like, they're going to probably select at number 5, especially with some uncertainty when it comes to Kawhi Leonard, some uncertainty when it comes to the rest of their roster. They, of course, again, they traded for Darius Garland last year, which makes them selecting Acuff extremely difficult. The Nets, it actually would make a lot of sense for Acuff, but again, if he's made it clear he doesn't want to be there, that's a whole other situation. And then I think a lot of people out there are like, why in the world would Darius Acuff want to go to the Kings? And I think it's pretty simple. This would kind of be a dream situation for a young player stepping into the league. There's a high likelihood that the Kings are going to move off of many of their veteran players, and that would leave Acuff as number 1, a starting point guard, but number 2, a starting point guard with sort of an unlimited leash. And, I think it's one thing. We go back to 2017 when Scott Perry was, again, working with Vlade Divac to help run this thing. He drafted De'Aaron Fox that year. They also signed George Hill to a 3-year deal during that offseason. They knew very quickly that De'Aaron Fox was closer to ready, and they moved off of George Hill by the trade deadline and kind of went on about their way. But I think this is going to be a little bit different because Acuff is, if you look at the way he handled himself in his freshman year at Arkansas, not only did he put up an incredible season where he averaged 23.5 points and shot 48% from the field, 44, 46% from 3, but he only got better. His final 17 games averaged almost 28 points, shot 48% from the field and 47% from 3 over that final 17 games. This is a player who walks into the league with an identity as an offensive player, and it should translate very quickly to the league. And if it doesn't, it might never transfer. That's going to be one of those things where you're taking a risk on a 6'2" guard. But I do think that there's a good chance that the Kings are offering an opportunity that other teams can't. Maybe the Nets can offer it, but again, the Nets went out and had something like 5 first-round picks in last year's draft, and like 2 or 3 of those were point guards. There's going to be bodies there competing. As of right now, Killian Hayes is the only point guard on the Kings roster. I saw Killian Hayes the other day. He was following a pre-draft workout. Him and Dylan Cardwell and Max Reynaud came out to go play some basketball. But the Kings have a wide open look here. And so as far as, like, are they playing chicken? Yeah, they're playing chicken for sure. They're betting that the other 2 teams are going to let Acuff fall. But here's the other thing. If he doesn't fall, it's not the end of the world. because that means that at least 2 of this group of 3 players is gonna fall to the Kings, and that's Keaton Wagler, it's Kingston Flemings, and it's Michael Brown. And all of those guys are going to be very good NBA basketball players. It's just sort of like which one do you like better and which one do you think fits your system better? The Kings just happen to really, really like the idea of a high scoring point guard. And Acuff fits that bill. So there are worse situations to be in. Definitely worse situations to be in. And you know what? We're going to get into one of those next. We're going to talk about Zach LaVine because this might be the worst situation for everybody involved. And, we got here. I don't know. I know how we got here, but we're here now and it is what it is. So let's discuss that after the break. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all in business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focused on growing your business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everybody working towards the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. One thing that really stands out for me is how the Kings got everything right, everyone pulling in one direction way back in the 22-23 season. Everyone was all in. That was Mike Brown's call. They even signed a document and they hung it on the wall. They framed it. This document that everyone was all in. It wasn't just one great player or coach. It was a coordinated effort across the entire organization that made it successful. That hasn't always been the case in Sacramento before or after that season, but for 1 year, they got it right. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free at odoo.com/locked on. That's ODOO.com/locked on. Okay, so in the first block, we discussed Sabonis and the situation potentially with the Toronto Raptors. Again, who knows if it will happen or not. In the second block, we talked about the Darius Acuff situation and what's going to happen there. Lots of moving pieces here. I hope that you're gathering that there are so many moving pieces. There's a draft, there's a lottery, there's a player that might fall to you, a player you might be able to trade, a player that you might figure out a new home for here and there. But I just kind of want to finish this whole discussion because with Zach LaVine, this is all going to work itself out in the next week or so, I believe. But our friend Sam Amick made it pretty clear late last week that LaVine and his people would be crazy not to opt out of it. I mean, to opt out of his contract, right? And again, I don't think Sam was saying anything that we haven't been saying here the whole time. Like, there's just a very, very slim chance of Zach LaVine opting out of his contract. And that's kind of been the prevailing thought behind the scenes as well with Kings management for a little while. According to my sources, the Kings gave Zach LaVine and Rich Paul, his agent, the opportunity to shop his client over the last month or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that, maybe since the end of the season. This idea that LaVine were to opt out, the Kings would work on him with a sign and trade that would pay him substantially less. The Kings would be willing to take back expiring contracts or player that fit the arc of the team. Again, either they could take back a 3-year deal of a player that's younger that fits the player arc of the team, or they could take along with some expiring contracts, or they could take again, like, just expiring contracts for the deal. So it's kind of a weird situation for the Kings and for LaVine to be in. But again, we've been reporting this nonstop for a while. So now we're down to the wire, and there are rumors that like the Pistons were interested in LaVine, but they also appear to be part of this giant Giannis Antetokounmpo deal that might derail interest completely, especially if Tyler Hero falls in their lap and becomes part of a 3-team or 4-team swap that's going on with Giannis and maybe the Heat and the Pistons, and even there's some talk about the Lakers being in there. Maybe there's another team that could work out here, but the clock is ticking. LaVine has until June 29th to either opt into his 1-year, $49 million deal or opt out and leave Sacramento behind. That means that if a sign and trade is going to be worked out, it has to be worked out before the opt-in date. Once he opts in, you cannot mess with that. Like it is what it is. He's a 1-year deal. You could extend him. You could try to rework his contract a little bit in an extension, but a true sign and trade deal would basically die. The Kings and Zach LaVine, I guess, could consider pushing that date back until after like the July 6th moratorium, so they all have more time to figure things out and work on things. But even that is a risk for LaVine, because if he doesn't get, I mean, if he opts out of his deal, then he would enter free agency instantly. If he pushes that back, then it would kind of confuse things. It would just be, again, a much easier transaction to either trade him now or to have him opt in and then figure out what you're going to do. There are a couple of options here, right? We talked about this before. Like the Kings aren't going to do a buyout and stretch provision Zach LaVine. I've had conversations with people inside the walls, and they say they're not going to do it. They don't want to be on the hook for even if they got him to reduce his amount, but 13 to 16 million a year for 3 years is just not going to happen. It's too much money for them to have as dead cap space. So that's why we're starting to see some of these other options. So the first thing they could do is they could try to trade his $49 million expiring contract. Maybe they find a taker, but it's unlikely. I mean, again, some of the most untradeable contracts in the history of the NBA have in fact been traded. Just go back and look at the Joe Johnson deal years ago, where it's like no one would ever trade for that money. Yeah, he got traded. I think he got traded twice after everyone thought he was untradeable. But I also would want to caution people, if they're going to trade him for his $49 million contract, it would probably have to be now, not at the trade deadline. Because at the trade deadline, because the salary is so high and because you've got to be within 75% of that salary, that would mean that unless you took back a gigantic one-player deal, 1 for 1, then chances are the Kings would be taking back a 3 or a 4 for 1 deal, which means that in order to have players get traded to you, you have to waive players on your own roster and create roster spots. So the Kings could have to literally, just waive a quarter of their roster in order to make this deal happen at the deadline. I don't see that happening. So again, we talked the stretch provision, they're not going to do. For their own reasons. And I get it. But we talked about this with our friend Yossi Goslin from the Third Apron last week. Maybe the Kings can find a trade with a team that has cap space, right? And again, he talked about the Bulls and Patrick Williams, and basically Patrick Williams is on a 3-year, I think $54 million deal. It's 18, and 18 million. The last year is a player option at 18 million. So basically the Bulls they have enough cap room right now. They could actually absorb LaVine's contract. And so instead of them paying Patrick Williams, who isn't part of their future, and they have shopped, they're basically willing, they might be willing to do all the money up front, bite the bullet now on their salary, take in Zach LaVine's 18 million, which would basically be 31 million more than what they're paying right now for Patrick Williams. But then you'd break the contract up. It'd be very similar to what we talked about with the stretch provision, where you stretch Zach LaVine's contract out over 3 seasons. The only difference is that Patrick Williams is a 24-year-old 3-and-D wing with good size, and he hasn't been great, and he's probably overpaid. But I also think that his contract next season and the season after that would actually be pretty tradable. And I'd also put it out there that, Like, I'm not sure how big of a difference there is between him and DeAndre Hunter. But again, you're looking at a similar size player, a guy who shoots the three ball about the same, maybe a little bit better defender. But you would have the replacement for DeAndre Hunter in case you weren't able to retain him next season. So there's at least some intrigue there. But again, I just don't know that the Bulls and the Kings are going to go back to the table and swap Zach LaVine out again. There's also other teams that have similar situations. Maybe again, the Nets would be willing to take on something like that. They have Terrence Mann that is only got under contract for 2 years, but like 15 and 16 million. Maybe they would like to bite the bullet and clear up a bunch of cap space right now. Next season, as opposed to waiting for some of these guys to kind of fall off the books. So that leaves us with one other option, and that is like the true buyout. And we discussed this again with Yossi last week. I highly suggest, if you guys haven't listened to that pod, go back and listen to Friday's podcast where we brought in, Yossi Goslin from Third Apron. He's just spectacular with the salary cap stuff. But he also said if he were the Kings, he'd basically be asking Zach LaVine if he wants a true buyout, if he wants to go out into the free agency market right now, that he needs to give back the equivalent of the mid-level exception, which is roughly 15 million. So as opposed to Zach LaVine making 49 million, he'd take 34 million. The Kings would waive him. He would go out and try to sign a new contract this summer with another team, whether that was for the mid-level exception or more money than that, or heaven forbid, less money than that. You just don't know. But the scenario that is facing Zach LaVine in Sacramento is pretty dark. And I just want to make sure we run through this one more time, because this podcast has been about potential trades and potential draft picks and what else it could look like. But if the Kings, let's just lay out this scenario. If they trade Sabonis for RJ Barrett and Grady Dick, they also still have Malik Monk and Nate Clifford. Zach LaVine could literally not see the court at all this season, and then have to jumpstart his career next year after sitting out the last half of last season. He missed the final 43 games or something, played a total of 39 games. But then most of this season, even if he was only playing like, say, 30 games, but he played 12 minutes a night, that's just not a good look going into free agency, expecting to make major money. So I do think, and when we add in that Zach LaVine next summer would go into free agency as a 32-year-old with a history of injuries, one catastrophic injury, another pretty substantial injury, and a foot injury, the pinky injury last year, I'm not that concerned about. But that would be pretty tough, because he would likely go from a player on a $49 million expiring contract to possibly even a league minimum deal, where teams are going to be like, hey, you can go play whoever you want. You can go to whatever team you want, but chances are you're not going to get paid major money. So again, I bring this up because there are just so many moving pieces right now. And we're actually getting to the point where I'm feeling a lot more confident with the possibility of like 3 of the Kingsbury contracts not being on the books in the next week or two. And I'm not positive, but at least I'm a lot more hopeful than I was before. And maybe the salary issue won't be such a huge issue when we get to, a couple of weeks from now. If Zach LaVine is gone, and again, if you got him to buy out at 34 million, and, again, you buy out DeMar DeRozan's 10 million and stretch provision, that you save, 8 or 9 million when it comes to a Sabonis trade. All of this sudden, you're seeing a team that could move from like $213 million in salary right now to, I don't know, take away the 9 million, the 22 million. So that's 31 from DeRozan, and then 15, that's 37. That's a lot of money. 46. Boy, I'm all over the place. 46 million. That all of a sudden would put the Kings as people with a lot of breathing room and the ability to either go sign some free agents, or maybe take in a contract or two and take a future first round pick from a team and start to asset collect in the right way. So lots of moving pieces, lots of things going on in Scott Perry's head. I am not envious of his situation today. Although it sure would be fun to have all of these potential moving pieces and sitting here trying to swing for the fences. So should be an interesting week in Kingsland. Again, we don't know what's going to happen. The Kings could strike out on Acuff on draft night. They could not move Sabonis. Zach LaVine could not give up $15 million and just say, if you don't want me here, I'll just go home and I'll deal with it next summer. All of those things could happen, but it does feel like there's more and more positive momentum for Scott Perry to actually reset this roster and maybe get it closer to something, at least the base of something that he would like to build in his own image. So, all right, thanks for tuning in. We went a little bit long. Make sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Kings so you get all the latest updates. Hit the notification button so you get an alert every time we post. Jump in the chat on YouTube and go crazy because it's been a lot of fun seeing you guys in there. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Kings ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonkings.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. On audio, make sure to make your second listen of the day NBA Game Night on Locked On Kings. Hey, we'll see you tomorrow. We're almost there. We're almost to the draft.